Well, hello everybody. Welcome all those online. If you're in the chat, let us know where you are. We would love to know that you're here with us. Man, if you're here online or in person, and I mean this, no matter who you are or where you come from, you're always welcome here at Santa Cruz Bible Church. We're really glad to have you. And man, in case you missed it, our services are back indoors, and we're really excited about that. We are sanitized, safe, socially distanced all the way. And what's been great about it is the live services have been a lot of fun, and it's just been really good to be back indoors. It's a great time to check us out. We'll be, I know you just heard about this, but we're going to say it again, next weekend, Easter weekend, right there, Easter weekend, 2 services, 9 and 10:30. We have online services, of course, as well. We have open air seating available for you, coffee, muffins, the whole 9. It's all going to be here, so do not miss it. And before we dig in, I want to say my family and I were privileged to attend a vigil for our Asian American Pacific Islander communities here in Santa Cruz. And what's amazing to me is there is so much to learn for all of us if we are willing to learn from those who are different than us. And man, I'll tell you, when we just go into environments and listen and learn, you only benefit from that. And I just want you to know, if you're a part of our Asian American communities here in Santa Cruz and things have just been very hard for you lately, I want to encourage you to text GET HELP to 831-750-1244 if you've just been wrestling with the recent events. And really, if you're anyone struggling with anything out there too, and just again, text GET HELP. We would love to pray for you and encourage you, and you can text that anytime. But we just want you to know your church is with you, and we've got your back. Okay, so we've been in part 5, that's right, Cinco, okay, of this series, Fighting Forward. And we've been doing the highlight reel, kind of 1st and 2nd Samuel in the Bible. If you've missed any of the weeks, though, don't worry about it. You can catch up on our app, on Facebook, YouTube, all that stuff. It's right here. You can get caught up at the gym, on the drive, wherever. We'd love for you to do that. But if you've missed any of this and you're kind of like, what am I missing? What's going on? It's really a tale of 2 kings. Okay, so what's happened is this. God has chosen a young guy to be the next king of Israel, a guy named David. And what's kind of awesome about David is God's given him success. His popularity has risen. I mean, it's going pretty good for David, right? He's just become successful and popular. But because of all this, the current king, Saul, wants him dead. Now, I want to remind you, this is not like some story or fable. This is actual history that happened here. And this week, as we jump back in, David is on the run. He's been on the run from Saul's search parties, and Saul has been hunting for him furiously. And what happens is, if anyone finds out that you gave David shelter, well, you get a special visit from the king, and you're dead. And these things keep happening, and it's frustrating for Saul because he keeps finding out where David has been, and then when he gets there, David's already gone. And it's just an obsession now for Saul. Saul is completely obsessed with taking out this person who he believes has been picked as the next king, and he wants him dead. And he gets intel that David's hiding in a certain area. And that's where we're going to pick up this story. So jump in here with me at 1 Samuel chapter 24, verse 2. It says, So Saul chose 3,000 elite troops from all Israel and went to search for David and his men near the rocks of the wild goats. I don't know where that is, but I assume they did, right? At the place where the road passes some sheepfolds, Saul went into a cave to relieve himself. But as it happened, David and his men were hiding farther back in that very cave. Okay, time out. What just happened? That is incredibly weird to read, and we all know that. It really does say that King Saul went to relieve himself in a cave. You don't read that a lot in the Bible. And if you're kind of wondering, what does that mean? He's taking a magazine, if you get my drift. Okay, that's kind of what's happening here. And this is what's even worse, is David and his men are in the same cave farther back, hiding in the shadows. And I don't know about you, but I couldn't think of a more vulnerable position to be in than this one. Like, it just doesn't get any worse than this. So let's pick it back up with verse 4. Now's your opportunity. David's men whispered to him, Today the Lord is telling you, I will certainly put your enemy into your power to do with as you wish. So David crept forward and cut off His head? No. A piece of the hem of Saul's robe. But then David's conscience began bothering him because he had cut Saul's robe. Let's just pause here for a second. This is a really interesting story. What an opportunity and a dilemma this is for David. And David's men are telling him, bro, this is it. God has brought your enemy right in front of you in the most vulnerable position ever. I mean, talk about just delivering what you need, what you've been wanting. I mean, this is incredible. This is your chance to kill him and take the crown. And see, this is a real predicament for David, because David was anointed as the next king when he was young, but he's never been king. He's now an adult. Decades have gone by. He's never gotten to do it. And what's on top of that, which is worse, he served King Saul faithfully. Honestly, but Saul has been cruel to him. He's tried to kill him multiple times. And I just want you to know, from a justice point of view, strictly from a justice point of view, David has every right to punish Saul and kill him and take the crown. He has every right to do that. And no one would have blinked. No one would have said what. It was so obvious that David had been done so horribly wrong. But in this moment, David leans forward, and instead of cutting Saul's throat, he cuts off a piece of his robe. It's kind of like he hesitates for a second, and then he does this. And even when he's holding the piece of the robe, his conscience starts really bothering him in this moment. And I think in this moment, David was wrestling with a question that all of us need to ask. And here's the question: can what is rightfully mine be wrongfully gained? Think about that for a second. Are there scenarios out there where what you should have can be gained by doing something you shouldn't do? See, temptation is super easy to see when it's something that's wrongfully yours, right? Like when it's obvious this is not something you should have, like when it's stealing money, or when it's someone else's spouse, stuff like that, right? You know, like that's wrongfully ours. Those temptations are a little bit more easy to see and obvious that, okay, I know that I shouldn't have this. But what if it's something that is rightfully yours? What if it's the promotion that you've more than earned? What if it's the dream that you've always had in your heart? What if it's needs in your life that could finally be met? What if it's recognition that you deserve? Could something that you rightfully should have, could it be wrongfully gained? What if the promotion meant that you had to throw another colleague under the bus? What if the dream meant that you were going to be away from your family for long periods of time? What if your needs could finally be met, but it's someone other than your spouse? What if the recognition was a little self-created? Think about that for a second. What if finally winning the game meant bending the rules? What would you do? Let's look and see what David does as we pick it back up here. And this is 1 Samuel 24, verse 6. Okay, it says, David said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do this to my Lord the king. I shouldn't attack the Lord's anointed one, for the Lord himself has chosen him." So David restrained his men and did not let them kill Saul. And after Saul had left the cave and gone on his way, David came out and shouted after him, "My Lord the king!" And when Saul looked around, David bowed low before him. Okay, this is going to get real tense, right? But let me pause it right in the middle of this super tense moment. Because I think David had to ask himself in this situation, okay, I could be king. It's in my hands. But the question is this something that should be given or taken? Is this something in my life that I should just take? Or is this something that needs to be given to me? And David is wrestling with this decision. I could take it now, or I could trust God for it, which is a lot harder to do. But this is rightfully mine. Should I trust that God's going to give it to me, or should I just take it because it's right in front of me? It's interesting to me, he refuses to take it. And what David could not see in the moment, think about this. What David couldn't see in the moment is how this would play out. I mean, honestly, if David had started his reign with violence, it probably would have been cut short with violence, right? I mean, when you sit and think about it, really think about this objectively and how this would all play out, he really made the wise decision. I mean, can you honestly imagine David with his grandkids one day, and he gathers around, he's like, come grandkids, come hear the story about how, I became king. Well, old mean King Saul, he was in the cave using the bathroom. And your brave, courageous grandfather came up behind him, and I cut his head off mid number 2. And now your courageous grandfather is king. Isn't that a great story, grandkids? No, it's not. It's a horrible story. I mean, you really sit and think through this. The action, in hindsight, and isn't it always 2020, right? In hindsight, it's obviously wrong. But keep in mind in the moment, in his life and in your life and in my life, it's not always that obvious that it's wrong. Because our emotions are right there with us. The fact that we haven't had this, the fact that we could have it, is right there. So here's what happens. Saul finishes. He leaves the cave. And David decides to reveal himself. So let's look at what happens. Look here at verse 9. It says, then he shouted to Saul, why do you listen to the people who say I'm trying to harm you? This very day you can see with your own eyes it isn't true. For the Lord placed you at my mercy back there in the cave. And some of my men told me to kill you, but I spared you. For I said, I will never harm the king. He is the Lord's anointed one. Look, my father, at what I have in my hand. He's with his father. He's saying, listen, you and I know each other. We were like family. This is a piece of the hem of your robe. I cut it off, but I didn't kill you. And this proves that I'm not trying to harm you, and I've not sinned against you, even though you've been hunting for me to kill me. And then he says, may the Lord judge between us. Woo! I like it. David calls him out and says, Saul! And everybody stops. And all those armies, we got all the weapons drawn, right? He says, I want you to know, Saul, I had the opportunity to take you out. And I didn't. Instead of cutting off your reign, I cut off a piece of your robe just to show you how close I was to you. I could have easily done it. But I didn't. And Saul, you hunt for me with malice, and yet I showed you mercy. May the Lord judge between us who has done right. And let me tell you, you don't say things like that unless you're pretty confident you're right. Saul will leave feeling shame. And we'll see what happens next week. But I want you to know that in situations, in any situation in life, the best position that you can ever be in is a clear conscience. We're going to face all kinds of weird situations and decisions in life. But the best position you can ever be in is having a clear conscience. And I'm going to tell you, it's not easy. It's not just easy decisions to have a clear conscience. Because emotion creates a fog in certain scenarios and situations in our lives that just makes decisions so much harder to make. It's going to take difficult decisions to keep a clear conscience. But in the end, it is always the best position. Because you want to know why? Because you have clean hands and you can sleep at night. And you may not have what you want yet, but God sees it, and it does get closer. Now, some of you are kind of like thinking, okay, I got it. David did the right thing. But when's the right thing ever going to happen for David, right? Like, what's going to happen? Well, let me speed up some of the story for you, because later, Saul will finally die in battle. But get this. He dies by falling on his own sword. That's how he dies. His death is a symbol of his own self-destructive life. You know what God knew in that moment that David didn't know? Is David didn't have to use his sword because Saul will fall on his own. And that's a big thing because David finally becomes the king of Israel. What he was been told since he was young, he finally gets to take the crown. But I want you to realize this. It all could have been jeopardized by shortcuts along the way. David decided, I can't shortcut the process that God has me in. I have to trust the process that God is putting me through right now. Even though it's hard, I'd rather trust this than just take it. What is rightfully yours can absolutely be wrongfully gained. There are just some things in life that you have to trust God for. Whether it's healing, growth, or some type of change that you need to happen in your life. Let's be honest, there's just some things we just can't make happen. I mean, look at David. He couldn't just up and decide to be king. It had to be given to him. And there are things where we can't force them. We're just going to have to trust God. You have to trust that God sees what you need. He knows exactly what you need and that He will bring what you need at the right time. But that is so incredibly hard to do. There will be times, I want you to hear me say this, there will be times where you're going to be tempted to shortcut the process. The pain of the process causes impatience. And there's always opportunities for impatience to destroy our lives if we're not careful. Going after what's rightfully ours, but wrongfully gaining it, and then having to deal with the consequences of that. See, I want you to know this. I will be tempted to take when I need to trust. You need to say that out loud yourself, that you will be tempted to take when you need to trust. This is rightfully mine. I can have it now. I've been waiting. Now, you have no idea what I've been through. Now, I know it's not ethical. And I know there's a price tag. I get it. And I get this person is not my spouse, and this isn't the way I thought this would happen. What happens is this, is if what is rightfully yours is wrongfully gained, you got so laser focused on the need that you didn't see the consequences. You didn't see that getting the promotion unethically would cost you your job. You didn't see how being away from your family all this time would affect your kids. You didn't see how now you're in a situation that's going to cost so much money and so many years to unravel. You could lose your marriage, your reputation, your finances. The list goes on and on and on and on. All because we took it instead of trusting God for it. It's a very real thing. There's an instance of this again in the Bible. Let me take you all the way back to the beginning in Genesis. And I'm just going to describe the story. It's in Genesis 25 if you want to read it this week. But let me kind of give you the highlight reel. There's a guy named Esau. He's coming in. He's been hunting. He's starving and he's exhausted. And his younger brother Jacob's over there and he's making this lentil stew and it smells really good. And Esau demands some stew. And this is where it gets weird. Jacob says, I'll give you some stew if you give me your rights as a firstborn son. Now you may be thinking, that is a super weird conversation. What does that even mean? Let me kind of tell you the scenario, because back then, firstborn rights were a very big deal, but they were never a big deal to Esau. And Jacob wanted those rights. And he was just sick of seeing how disregardful Esau was about it. So to make a point, he offers him a bowl of stew for the rights. And Esau gives up his rights as a firstborn for a bowl of stew. And Jacob gets them. And then the Bible tells us, this is so interesting, because Esau, remember, he gave up later for now. And I want to just tell you, Don't give up later for now. Let me show you why. Because look here in the book of Hebrews, it says this in verse 12. It says, watch out for the Esau syndrome. Trading away God's lifelong gift in order to satisfy a short-term appetite. You well know how Esau later regretted that impulsive act and wanted God's blessing, but by then it was too late. Tears or no tears. Man, don't throw away a long-term process for a short-term appetite. It's going to be incredibly tempting. It's going to be all you can see in the moment. But don't let an impulse sabotage what's most important. When the opportunity comes to shortcut, drive on by, wave, say bye Felicia, and keep moving. Do not pull over. Do not take the exit ramp. Drive on by. Some of you are in a process right now. COVID messed everybody up. 2020 messed everybody up, right? We're all still dealing with the effects of it, and maybe you're just in a process right now. You can rest and take a deep breath in the fact that God is faithful. He knows what you need. He knows what is rightfully yours. You can trust Him. It's hard. But you can trust the process that God has you in right now. Don't take the shortcuts. You're not going to like where the shortcut ends up. Shortcuts look great. That exit ramp looks awesome. What's on that sign looks great. You don't want to know where that goes. You don't want to end up there. Sometimes we just don't understand. We have all kinds of questions. Why do I have to wait for this? God, why do I have to work for that? Why do I have to wait for something that I should already have? Why do relationships require so much work? Right? Why do dreams have a process before they can happen? Why can't I just heal immediately? Why does growth take so long? Why can't this change that you know I need in my life right now? Why can't it just happen today? Questions we all ask God in our most honest moments. But I think life is this way partly because of this. God wants us to trust Him. But He also wants you to see how faithful He is. There are certain situations we go through in life. I think God wants us to trust Him, and then we're going to see His faithfulness. Trusting God is very, very, very hard to do. But man, when you see His faithfulness in your life, when you finally see what He was trying to bring you toward, it's one of the most rewarding experiences you will ever have in this existence, is seeing what He does in the end. God will open doors and move in ways that you could have never imagined. He can do it. And I want you to know the decision is going to be, do I take what takes the edge off? Or do I want to watch God show off later? Let me tell you how this applies to me personally. Before moving to Santa Cruz, I had some opportunities in Tampa where I was to just stay there and start a church. There have been some painful things happen there in Tampa, but I had all these people reaching out, people literally ready to give. I even had opportunities to basically just, here's the building, that kind of stuff. I mean, crazy opportunities and a lot of pressure to start a church. And honestly, it would have been easier to just start leading there. I already had some stuff to start with. It just would have been easier. But there would be consequences. The consequence of trying to carve a future out of the past. You ever had a moment in life where you have an opportunity to stay somewhere, but you need to move on, but it's just easier to stay? You ever had that moment, maybe a relationship or something like that, because the past is just so safe? What I know is just so easy. Can I just do that instead of doing something totally new? And in that moment, I decided, I'm going to pass on the opportunity for now, and I'm going to trust God for later. And I want you to understand, I had no other option. There was no option out there to look at and think, okay, well, there's always this or that. No, there was nothing else at the time. I just decided, no, I'm not going to do this, as hard as this is for me. And it was very, very, very difficult. But you know what happened? I trusted God for later. And then later, God brought me to Santa Cruz, California. Santa Cruz wasn't even an option I knew about then. But it was the direction that God wanted me to go. And man, I'm going to tell you, it is very scary to go to somewhere totally new, to go to something totally new and start all over. It's so much easier to do pretty much anything else and then go across the country and just start over with 4 kids and everything else. But can I tell you the end result? I'm really glad I trusted him. It was so hard. You have no idea. But he was more than faithful. I want to tell you, I don't really do a lot of things right in life. But as I came out the other end of this one, I want you to understand that only God can bring to you what you never knew was possible. If you will just hang on. If you will not take the exit ramp. If you will stay on the road and just watch his faithfulness. You may not know that God has a direction for you. You may not be sure, but I want you to know he does. But you can miss it with a shortcut if you're not careful. His faithfulness is more than you'll ever imagine, but it follows a process. But in the end of that process, you're going to be ready for what he has next for you. But just don't take the exit ramp off the process. If you will stay on the road, even though you're not even sure where you're driving, what's in front of you, you will watch his faithfulness and his goodness come to pass. Don't give up later for now. Trust him. Really trust him. You'll be really glad you did. They're saying to you, all your life, he's been faithful. Would you rest in that? And would you rely on that? Would you literally put all the chips in, move it all across the table on his faithfulness? You'll be so glad, so glad that you did. We love you. We are praying for you. We hope we will see you either online or in person next week for an amazing, amazing Easter celebration. And if there's anything you ever need, please reach out and let us know. We'll see you next week.